If you think a forbidden romance is all glam and movie kisses, forget it. This one has real tension. Hotel corridors, urgency, fear, desire, and that kind of silence that screams louder than any confession. She tries not to feel. He tries to stay in control. Spoiler, no one controls it. And when a man who's used to running everything loses his footing, the fall is beautiful and brutal. The glass tower pierced the London skyline like a shard of ice, its mirrored surface reflecting the grey November clouds that hung low over the city. Amelia Sinclair stood in the pristine lobby, her fingers gripping the leather portfolio so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times during the flight from Manchester, had prepared herself for the possibility of seeing him again after nearly 2 years of silence. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of standing in his building. The marble beneath her feet was cold and unforgiving, much like the man who owned everything within these walls. Cunningham Aviation occupied 40 floors of this architectural marvel, a testament to the empire built by a man who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Oliver Cunningham. The name alone could make her heart stutter with a mixture of longing and rage so potent, she sometimes wondered how her chest could contain both emotions without splitting open. "Miss Sinclair?" A crisp voice cut through her thoughts. A woman in an impeccable navy suit approached, her smile professional but warm. "I'm Victoria, Mr. Cunningham's executive assistant. Welcome to Cunningham Aviation. Your team is waiting in conference room 7. Amelia forced her lips into what she hoped resembled a smile. "Thank you." As she followed Victoria toward the elevator bank, she caught her reflection in the polished chrome doors. She looked different from the girl who had cleaned hotel rooms in her worn uniform, her hair always pulled back in a simple bun. Now her auburn hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and she wore a charcoal pencil skirt with a cream silk blouse that whispered elegance without ostentation. She had worked hard to transform herself, to build something from the ashes of abandonment. The elevator ascended with barely a whisper, and Amelia's stomach dropped. Not from the motion, but from the memories. She closed her eyes briefly, willing them away, but they came anyway, unbidden and unwelcome, his hands on her waist. His voice, rough with emotion, saying her name like a prayer. The way he had looked at her in those stolen moments, as if she were the only thing in the world that mattered. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. All lies. The elevator doors opened to reveal a corridor of glass and steel, sleek and intimidating. Victoria led her past offices where people bent over computers, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of screens. Everything here spoke of power, control, precision. Everything here was him. "Your logistics team arrived 20 minutes ago," Victoria explained as they walked. "Mr. Cunningham will join the meeting shortly. He's currently in a video conference with our Singapore office, but he wanted me to ensure you were comfortable." He knew she was here. Of course he did. Oliver Cunningham knew everything that happened within his empire. The thought made her skin prickle with awareness, and something else, something she refused to name. Conference room 7 was expansive, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the Thames. Her colleagues from Nordic Logistics were already seated, reviewing documents and preparing their presentation. They greeted her with nods and smiles, unaware that their newest team member was barely holding herself together. Thomas Wright, her supervisor, gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Amelia, excellent timing. We're just finalizing the quarterly report data. Mr. Cunningham has a reputation for asking very specific questions." "I'm aware," she said quietly, settling into the leather chair. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her portfolio, and she pressed them flat against the cool surface of the table. Across the river, she could see the London Eye turning slowly against the slate sky. Somewhere in this city was her daughter, safe with Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who had become more family than friend. Little Grace, with her father's storm-grey eyes and the same small crescent-shaped birthmark on her left shoulder that Oliver bore. The child he didn't know existed. The secret sat heavy in Amelia's chest, a weight she carried with every breath. She had tried to tell him once after the initial shock had faded and reality had set in, but his phone number led to nothing, His email bounced back, and when she had finally gathered the courage to call his office, a cold voice had informed her that Mr. Cunningham was not accepting personal calls and to please not contact again. That rejection had nearly broken her. She had been 3 months pregnant, alone in a strange city, working 2 jobs to afford a tiny room above a bakery. The smell of fresh bread had made her violently ill every morning, but she had endured because she had no choice. She had endured because she refused to be defeated. The door to the conference room opened, and Amelia's breath caught in her throat. She didn't need to look up to know who had entered. The air itself seemed to change, charged with an energy that made her skin hum with recognition. "Good afternoon, everyone." His voice, deep, authoritative, with that slight rasp that had once whispered her name in the darkness. Amelia kept her eyes fixed on the papers before her heart hammering so violently she was certain everyone could hear it. "I apologize for the delay," Oliver Cunningham continued, and she could hear him moving around the table, greeting her colleagues with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to command. "I trust Victoria has made you comfortable. Shall we begin?" Amelia finally allowed herself to look up and found him staring directly at her, his face drained of all color, his gray eyes wide with something that looked terrifyingly close to devastation. Time fractured. Oliver Cunningham had built an empire on his ability to maintain control in any situation, to read a room in seconds and adjust his strategy accordingly. He had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without flinching, had stared down corporate raiders and hostile boards with nothing more than the force of his will. He had learned at his father's knee that emotion was weakness, that sentiment was the downfall of lesser men. But standing in the doorway of Conference Room 7, looking into Amelia Sinclair's hazel eyes for the first time in 22 months, 17 days, and approximately 6 hours, Oliver felt his carefully constructed world implode. She was here, in his building, in his city, real. His mind struggled to process what his eyes were telling him. The woman he had searched for desperately, the woman who had haunted his dreams and poisoned his waking hours with longing, was sitting at his conference table with a portfolio open before her and an expression of such carefully controlled neutrality it made his chest ache. She looked different, polished, professional, self-assured in a way that made something fierce and possessive surge through him. Her hair was longer, falling in waves that caught the weak November light. She wore no jewelry except for small pearl earrings, and her hands, those delicate hands he had kissed and memorized, were folded neatly atop her papers. She was looking at him with absolutely no recognition, as if he were a stranger. It was the cruelest thing she could have done. "Mr. Cunningham," Thomas Wright's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you quite all right?" Oliver forced his body to move, to complete the journey into the room that his paralyzed muscles had interrupted. Years of practice allowed him to summon a smile, though it felt like cracking stone. "Perfectly well, thank you. Please, let's begin." He took his seat at the head of the table, a position that should have given him power, control, dominance. Instead, it placed him directly in Amelia's line of sight, and he found himself incapable of looking anywhere else. She was here, his Amelia. The woman he had abandoned on a rain-soaked morning in Paris because he had been too much of a coward to fight for what he wanted. The woman he had tried and failed to forget. The woman he had called Victoria about obsessively for months, asking if she had tried to contact him, if there had been any messages, anything at all. There had been nothing. He had assumed she hated him. He had convinced himself it was better that way, that she deserved someone whole and unbroken, someone not shackled by family obligations and contractual marriages, and a life built on duty rather than desire. But he had never stopped looking for her. Thomas Wright was speaking now, presenting quarterly logistics data with charts and projections that Oliver normally would have absorbed instantly. Instead, every cell in his body was attuned to the woman sitting 4 chairs away, to the way her breathing had quickened slightly, to the faint flush creeping up her neck. She wasn't as unaffected as she pretended. The thought sent a rush of hope through him, so powerful it was almost painful. He had never intended to fall in love. Love was not part of the plan his father had laid out for him from birth. Oliver Cunningham was meant to marry Genevieve Ashford, merge 2 aviation dynasties, produce heirs and build an empire that would span continents. Emotion was irrelevant. Connection was unnecessary. Then he had walked into the Hotel Le Meurice in Paris on a rainy Tuesday evening and a maid with sad eyes and capable hands had dropped her cleaning cart when he had rounded a corner too quickly. Bottles and soaps had scattered across the marble floor, and she had dropped to her knees immediately, apologizing in a soft voice that had made something in his chest twist painfully. He had helped her gather the fallen items, their hands brushing, and when she had looked up at him with those extraordinary hazel eyes, he had felt something shift fundamentally in the architecture of his soul. He had tried to walk away. He had almost succeeded. But the next day, when he had seen her pushing her cart down the hallway, he had invented a reason to need extra towels. And the day after that, he had asked her name. And the day after that, he had kissed her in the service elevator while the city lights of Paris glittered through the glass walls. 1 week. They had only had 1 week. It had been enough to destroy him for anyone else. "Mr. Cunningham," Thomas Wright's voice cut through his reverie. "Did you have any questions about the proposed routing changes?" Oliver dragged his attention back to the presentation, though it cost him dearly. "The Singapore integration," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos raging inside him. "Walk me through the timeline again." As Thomas spoke, Oliver allowed himself one more glance at Amelia. She was taking notes, her pen moving across the page with quick, efficient strokes. She had always had beautiful handwriting. He had watched her write her phone number on a scrap of paper once, had memorized every loop and curve, had kept that paper in his wallet until the day he had been forced to destroy it. The meeting dragged on for another hour. Oliver contributed where necessary, asked the appropriate questions, projected the image of a CEO fully engaged with the minutiae of logistics contracts. Inside, he was screaming. When Thomas finally closed his presentation folder, Oliver stood. "Excellent work, everyone. Miss Sinclair, might I have a word? There are some specific questions about the Manchester operations I'd like to discuss." He saw her jaw tighten imperceptibly, saw the way her fingers curled around her pen. But when she looked up at him, her expression was perfectly professional. "Of course, Mr. Cunningham." The others filed out, exchanging pleasantries and promises to reconvene the next morning. Victoria appeared in the doorway, but Oliver waved her away with a subtle gesture. The door clicked shut, and suddenly they were alone. The silence was suffocating. Amelia stood slowly, gathering her papers with deliberate care. She didn't look at him. "I'm not sure what questions you could possibly have about Manchester operations that require a private conversation." "Look at me." The words came out harsher than he intended, rough with 22 months of longing. "I don't work for you, Mr. Cunningham. I work for Nordic Logistics." "Amelia, don't." She finally met his eyes, and the pain he saw there nearly drove him to his knees. "Don't say my name like that. Don't look at me like that. We are colleagues in a professional setting, nothing more. You can't possibly believe that." "What I believe," she said quietly, her voice shaking despite her obvious attempt at control, "is that this meeting is over." She moved toward the door, and instinct drove Oliver forward. He caught her wrist gently, carefully, his fingers barely making contact. Even that slight touch sent electricity racing up his arm. Amelia froze, stared down at where his hand encircled her wrist. When she looked up at him again, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Let me go, Oliver." "I tried," he said hoarsely. "God knows I tried. I can't." Amelia pulled her wrist from his grasp, with a strength she didn't know she possessed. The absence of his touch left her skin cold, aching, but she forced herself to step back, to put distance between them before she did something foolish like collapse into his arms and weep for everything they had lost. "You don't get to do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't get to walk away without a word and then act like I'm the one being unreasonable." Oliver's jaw clenched, a muscle jumping beneath the perfectly groomed stubble that shadowed his face. He looked older than she remembered, she realized with a pang. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a weariness in his expression that spoke of sleepless nights and burdens carried alone. Good. She hoped he had suffered. She hoped he had felt even a fraction of the agony she had endured. "I know," he said quietly. "I know I have no right to anything from you, but please, just listen." "To what?" Another lie? Another excuse? She crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive gesture she couldn't help. "I read about your wedding, Oliver. The society pages couldn't stop talking about how you and Genevieve Ashford were the perfect match. Aviation royalty, they called it. Something flickered across his face. Pain, regret, she couldn't tell. There was no wedding. The words hung in the air between them. Amelia blinked, her carefully constructed armor cracking slightly. What? I postponed it. 3 times. He ran a hand through his dark hair, disheveling the perfectly styled strands in a gesture that was achingly familiar. The engagement contract was broken 6 months ago. I paid the penalty, nearly destroyed the company's liquidity in the process. She didn't want to feel the hope that surged through her chest, didn't want to care why he had walked away from a marriage that had been arranged since childhood. It didn't change what he had done to her. It didn't erase the morning she had woken up nauseous and alone, or the night she had cried herself to sleep, wondering why she hadn't been enough. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Oliver took a step closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. Because I couldn't marry her while I was in love with someone else. The confession hit her like a physical blow. Amelia closed her eyes, willing the tears not to fall. Don't. Please don't say things like that. It's the truth. It's been the truth since the moment you dropped that cleaning cart and looked up at me like I was just a man who had startled you, not a name or a title or an acquisition target. His voice was raw, stripped of the polished veneer he showed the world. You saw me, Amelia, the real me, and I was terrified. So you left. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. You got scared, and you ran, and I was left to... She stopped herself just in time, the words about Grace dying on her lips. She wasn't ready for that conversation, might never be ready. Oliver noticed the hesitation, his grey eyes sharpening with concern. Left to what? Amelia, what happened after I left? I tried to find you. I sent people to the hotel, but they said you'd quit. No forwarding address, no contact information, it was like you'd vanished. I had to leave Paris, she said carefully. I had my reasons. What reasons? None that concern you anymore. The hurt that crossed his face was so profound it made her chest ache. She steeled herself against it, against the part of her that wanted to comfort him, to smooth away the pain she had caused. He had hurt her first. He had left her first. Everything about you concerns me, Oliver said softly. It always has. Even when I was trying to convince myself otherwise, even when I was drowning in contracts and obligations and trying to be the man my father demanded I be, you were there. In every thought, every dream, every moment of silence. Amelia shook her head, backing toward the door. This isn't fair. You can't just say these things. Why not? They're true. I love you, Amelia. I've loved you since Paris. I never stopped. Love isn't enough. The words burst from her like a dam breaking. Love doesn't pay the bills or keep you warm at night when you're alone and terrified. Love doesn't... She cut herself off again, pressing her hand to her mouth. She was saying too much, revealing too much. Grace was her secret, her daughter, and she wasn't ready to share that with the man who had proven he couldn't be trusted with her heart. Oliver was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Amelia, please, just tell me what happened. Whatever it is, whatever you went through, let me help. I don't need your help. I survived just fine without you. Survived, he repeated, and the words seemed to hurt him. You shouldn't have had to just survive. You deserved so much more. You deserved the world, and I was too much of a coward to give it to you. The admission disarmed her. She had expected excuses, justifications, the same dismissive arrogance she had witnessed in the society pages whenever he was photographed at some gala or corporate event. She hadn't expected this broken honesty, this man who looked at her like she was oxygen and he was drowning. I need to go, she whispered. My team is waiting. Have dinner with me. No. Please. One dinner. Let me explain everything. Let me tell you what really happened, why I left the way I did. He moved closer and she could smell his cologne, that subtle scent of cedar and rain that had haunted her for nearly 2 years. And then, if you still want me to leave you alone, I will. I swear it. Amelia's resolve wavered. She knew she should refuse, should walk out of this building and never look back. But there was a part of her, a part she hated, that wanted to hear his explanation. That wanted to believe he had a reason beyond simple cowardice. And there was Grace to consider. Her daughter deserved to know her father, didn't she? deserved more than the carefully constructed stories Amelia had told about a man who had loved them but couldn't stay. "One dinner," she heard herself say, "but not tonight. I need time to think." Hope blazed in Oliver's eyes, so bright it almost hurt to look at. "Tomorrow, tomorrow," she agreed, and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Oliver stood alone in the conference room long after Amelia had left, staring at the spot where she had stood, trying to convince himself that she had been real and not another cruel dream conjured by his exhausted mind. She was here, in London, working for one of his logistics partners. The probability of such a coincidence was astronomical, and yet here they were, thrown together by fate or fortune or whatever force governed the universe. He should have felt elated. Instead, he felt terrified, because he had seen the pain in her eyes, had heard the bitterness in her voice when she spoke of survival. Something had happened after he left Paris, something that had hardened her, changed her from the gentle woman who had laughed at his terrible French and traced patterns on his chest in the early morning hours. His phone buzzed. A text from Nathan Holland, his best friend and the company's CFO. "Board meeting in 20. Where are you?" Oliver typed back a quick response and gathered his things, his mind still reeling. He needed to focus, to compartmentalize the way he always had. But for the first time in his life, he found himself incapable of shoving his emotions into the locked box, where he kept everything that threatened his control. The board meeting was torture. His father, Richard Cunningham, sat at the opposite end of the table, his weathered face carved from disapproval. The old man hadn't spoken to Oliver directly since he had broken the engagement with Genevieve, communicating only through terse emails and pointed silences. Oliver barely heard the quarterly reports, the discussion of fleet expansion, the debate over labor contracts. His mind was in a hotel room in Paris, watching Amelia sleep in the early morning light, her auburn hair spread across the pillow like spilled wine. He had loved her so desperately it had frightened him, had wanted to chuck everything, the company, the family expectations, the carefully constructed life he had never wanted, just to stay in that bubble of happiness they had created. But the call had come. A crisis in Singapore, millions on the line, decisions that only he could make. And in the grey dawn, looking at her peaceful face, he had convinced himself that leaving was the kindest thing he could do. She deserved better than a man shackled to an engagement contract, a man who came with more baggage than any heart could carry. She deserved freedom, choice, a life not dictated by mergers and family dynasties. So he had dressed in silence, had written her name on a hotel notepad 17 times before crumpling the paper and throwing it away, had walked out of that room with every intention of never seeing her again, because he had been certain it was the right thing to do. He had been an idiot. "Oliver," Nathan's voice cut through his thoughts. "You're being asked a question." Oliver refocused, to find the entire board staring at him expectantly. His father's expression was particularly thunderous. "I apologize," Oliver said smoothly. "Could you repeat that?" The meeting continued, but Oliver could feel Nathan's concerned gaze on him. His friend knew him too well, had seen him through the darkest period after returning from Paris, when Oliver had nearly drunk himself into oblivion trying to forget hazel eyes and soft laughter. When the meeting finally concluded, Nathan cornered him in the hallway. "What's going on? You were completely absent in there." Oliver leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "She's here in London." Nathan's eyes widened. "The woman from Paris, are you certain?" "I just sat through an hour-long meeting with her logistics team. Pretty certain." "Holy hell." Nathan ran a hand over his face. "Does she know you've been looking for her?" "I haven't exactly had a chance to explain. She can barely stand to be in the same room with me." Oliver closed his eyes. "I hurt her, Nathan. Badly. And I don't know how to fix it." "Start with the truth. Tell her why you left. Tell her about the contract." "I tried. She doesn't want to hear it." "Then make her listen." Nathan gripped his shoulder. "You've been half dead since Paris. Don't let her slip away again because you're too proud or too scared to fight for her." Oliver nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. What if she had moved on? What if there was someone else in her life now, someone who had been there when he wasn't, someone who had earned the smiles he used to coax from her? The thought made him physically ill. That evening, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, leaving the office before midnight. He drove to his penthouse in Kensington, poured himself a scotch he didn't drink, and stood at the window overlooking the glittering city. Somewhere out there, Amelia was having dinner or reading a book, or doing any of the 1,000 small things that made up a life he knew nothing about. He pulled out his phone and opened the private investigator's report he had commissioned months ago, the one that had come back empty. No Amelia Sinclair in Paris or any of the surrounding cities. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. But she was here now, and tomorrow he would have dinner with her, would have a chance to explain, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness if that's what it took. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Thomas Wright at Nordic Logistics, thanking him for the meeting and confirming tomorrow's schedule. Attached was a brief biography of the team members. Oliver scrolled down to Amelia's entry, hungry for any scrap of information. Amelia Sinclair, Assistant Operations Manager, joined Nordic Logistics 14 months ago, relocated from Manchester. Previously employed at Henderson & Sons accounting firm. Education, Business Administration degree from Manchester Metropolitan University, completed part-time. She had gone back to school, had built a career, had created a life without him. Pride and heartbreak warred in his chest. She had survived just as she said, had thrived even, and he had no place in any of it. But there was something else in the report, something that caught his attention. A brief note. Emergency contact, listed as Mrs. Eleanor Henderson, Manchester. Not a parent. Amelia had told him her parents were dead. Not a sibling. A Mrs. Henderson. Oliver opened a new browser window and began to search, knowing he was crossing a line, knowing he should respect her privacy. But he had to understand, had to know what had happened in the months since Paris. An hour later, he sat back, his heart pounding. Eleanor Henderson, 72 years old, ran a small bakery in Manchester, had sold the business 8 months ago. In several local news articles about community charity work, she was photographed with a young woman and a small child with curly dark hair. Oliver zoomed in on the photo, his hands trembling. The woman was Amelia, older, thinner, but unmistakably her, and the child. The child had grey eyes, storm grey eyes that looked exactly like the ones Oliver saw in the mirror every morning. His phone slipped from his nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor. Amelia stood in front of the mirror in her hotel room, her hands shaking as she fastened the delicate silver necklace Mrs. Henderson had given her before she left Manchester. The older woman had squeezed her hand and said, "Whatever happens tonight, remember that you're strong enough to handle it." If only that were true. She had changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple forest green dress that brought out the gold flecks in her eyes. Not too formal, not too casual. She told herself it didn't matter what Oliver thought of her appearance, that this dinner was merely an opportunity to hear his explanation and then close this chapter of her life forever. She was an excellent liar, except when it came to herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Henderson. "Grace is asking about you. We made cookies and she's covered in flour. She says to tell you she loves you to the moon." Amelia's eyes stung. She typed back quickly, "Tell her I love her to the moon and back. Kiss her goodnight for me. Grace." Her beautiful, impossible daughter with Oliver's eyes and his stubborn chin, and that same crescent birthmark on her left shoulder. The child he didn't know existed because Amelia had been too hurt, too proud, too terrified to try again after that first failed attempt to reach him. She had told herself it was better this way. That Grace deserved stability, not a father who might disappear when things got difficult. But watching her daughter's face light up whenever she saw other children with their fathers, Amelia wondered if she had made the right choice. A knock at the door made her jump. She checked her watch. 7 o'clock exactly. Of course Oliver would be punctual. The man probably scheduled his breathing. She opened the door and immediately regretted every choice that had led to this moment. He was devastating in a charcoal suit with no tie, the top 2 buttons of his white shirt undone in a way that was somehow more intimate than formal. His dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he had been running his hands through it, and his grey eyes were bloodshot with exhaustion. He looked at her like she was water and he was dying of thirst. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Thank you." She grabbed her coat and purse, needing to move, to do something other than stand there drinking in the sight of him. "Where are we going?" "There's a small Italian restaurant near here. Quiet, private." He paused. "Unless you'd prefer somewhere else?" That's fine. They rode the elevator down in silence so thick Amelia could barely breathe. She was hyper-aware of everything about him, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way he kept his hands rigidly at his sides as if afraid to move, the rapid pulse beating at his throat. The restaurant was indeed small and quiet, tucked away on a side street with soft lighting and intimate tables. The owner greeted Oliver warmly, leading them to a corner booth partially hidden by a screen of trailing ivy. "You come here often?" Amelia asked as she slid into the booth. "Never, actually. Nathan recommended it, said it was romantic." Oliver winced, which probably wasn't the right thing to say given the circumstances. Despite herself, Amelia felt her lips twitch. Probably not. A waiter appeared with menus and a wine list. Oliver ordered a bottle of Chianti without looking at the menu, then caught himself. "Unless you'd prefer something else." "Chianti is fine." She had never been much of a wine drinker, but tonight she needed the courage it might provide. When they were alone again, Oliver leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "I don't know where to start. The beginning usually works." He nodded slowly. "The engagement to Genevieve was arranged when I was 8 years old. Our families had been friends for generations, and my father saw it as the perfect merger. Cunningham Aviation and Ashford Industries, united through marriage. I grew up knowing that my life wasn't my own, that every decision had been made before I was old enough to have an opinion." Amelia listened, her throat tight. She had known he came from wealth, but she hadn't understood the extent of his cage. "I tried to fight it once when I was in university, told my father I wouldn't go through with it. He threatened to destroy Ashford Industries and bankrupt Genevieve's family unless I honored the contract." Oliver's jaw clenched. "I was 21 and stupid enough to believe him, so I agreed, signed the papers, resigned myself to a life of duty over desire." "What changed?" Amelia asked softly. "You." The word was simple, devastating. "I met you and realized I had been living half a life. You made me laugh, Amelia. You made me feel like maybe I was worth something beyond my last name and my bank balance. And it terrified me because I knew I couldn't have you. Not really. Not while I was bound to someone else. So you left." "So I left," he confirmed, and the pain in his voice was palpable. "Because I thought it was kinder than dragging you into my mess. Because I thought you deserved someone who could give you everything, not someone who came with contracts and obligations and a future already written." Amelia took a long sip of wine, using the time to collect herself. "Did it ever occur to you to ask me what I wanted?" Oliver flinched. "No. And that was my greatest mistake." The waiter returned with their appetizers, giving Amelia a moment to process. Part of her wanted to stay angry, to nurse the hurt that had sustained her through the darkest months. But another part, the part that had loved him so completely in Paris, understood the impossible position he had been in. "What happened with Genevieve?" she asked when they were alone again. "I came back from Paris and couldn't go through with it. I looked at her and felt nothing but emptiness. She deserved better than that, and so did I." He pushed food around his plate without eating. "I postponed the wedding the first time, claiming business complications. The second time, I was more honest. Told her I couldn't marry her while I was in love with someone else." "How did she react?" "She slapped me. Then she thanked me." Oliver smiled without humor. "Turns out she had been having an affair with her childhood friend for years. We were both trapped in a contract neither of us wanted. Breaking it cost me millions in penalties, but it was worth every penny." Amelia set down her fork, her appetite gone. "Why didn't you come find me then? If you were free, if you loved me." "I tried." The anguish in his voice made her chest ache. "God, Amelia, I tried everything. I went back to Paris, but you had quit the hotel without notice. No forwarding address, no contact information. I hired investigators. I searched every social media platform. You had vanished completely. I had to leave," she said carefully. "I had my reasons." "What reasons? Please help me understand." She opened her mouth to tell him about Grace, about the pregnancy, and the failed attempts to reach him and the lonely terror of those first months, but the words stuck in her throat. Once she told him, everything would change. He would either reject them both or he would try to claim them, and she didn't know which prospect frightened her more. "It doesn't matter now," she said instead. "It matters to me. Everything about you matters to me." The intensity in his gaze made her feel exposed, vulnerable. She looked away, focusing on the ivy trailing across the screen. "You hurt me, Oliver. You left without a word, without giving me a chance to—" Her voice broke. She pressed her hand to her mouth, willing herself not to cry. Oliver reached across the table and gently took her other hand. She should have pulled away, should have maintained the distance she needed to protect herself. But his touch was warm and familiar and desperately missed. "I know," he said quietly. "And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right if you'll let me." Oliver's hand was warm around hers, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm in a gesture that was achingly familiar. In Paris, he had done the same thing while they talked late into the night, his touch grounding her in a way nothing else ever had. Amelia knew she should pull away, knew that every moment she allowed this connection to rebuild was another brick in a wall that would eventually crumble and bury her. But she was so tired of being strong, so tired of carrying everything alone. "Tell me about your life now," Oliver said softly. "Please, I want to know everything." She slipped her hand from his, needing the distance to think clearly. "There's not much to tell. I work for Nordic Logistics. I have an apartment in Manchester. I live a quiet life. You went back to school." Her eyes flew to his. "How did you know that?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Your employee biography mentioned it. I wasn't snooping exactly. I wanted to know you were okay." "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I have a good job, good colleagues. I've built something for myself." "I'm proud of you," Oliver said, and the sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. "You always were brilliant. I remember when you told me about wanting to study business but not being able to afford it. I'm glad you found a way." Amelia remembered that conversation, whispered in the dark of his hotel room while rain pattered against the windows. She had told him things she had never told anyone, about her parents' death in a car accident when she was 13, about the foster homes and the struggle to survive, about the dreams she had abandoned because survival took precedence over ambition. He had listened like every word mattered, had held her while she cried for the first time in years, and then he had left. "It wasn't easy," she said, her voice harder than she intended. "Working full-time and taking classes at night. But I did it because I had to, because I had responsibilities." Something shifted in Oliver's expression, a sharpening of focus that made her realize she had said too much. What responsibilities? Just life, bills, rent, the usual things. "Amelia," he leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "What aren't you telling me?" Everything. She was hiding everything. The pregnancy, the birth, the daughter who had his eyes and his stubborn determination. The sleepless nights when Grace had been colicky and Amelia had walked the floor alone, singing lullabies through her tears. The first time Grace had smiled, and Amelia had wished desperately that Oliver could have been there to see it. "It's not important," she said, but her voice shook. "It's important to me. Did something happen after I left? Did someone hurt you?" The genuine concern in his voice nearly undid her. "No, nothing like that." "Then what?" "Please, you keep alluding to something, and it's driving me insane not knowing if you're okay." "I am okay. I survived, like I said." "That's the second time you've used that word. Survived." Oliver's jaw clenched. "What did you have to survive, Amelia?" The waiter chose that moment to clear their plates and present the main courses. Amelia had ordered pasta she couldn't eat, her stomach in knots. Oliver had ordered something equally untouched. When they were alone again, Oliver tried a different approach. "I found a photograph from a local newspaper in Manchester. You were at some charity event with an older woman and a child." Amelia's blood turned to ice. "You investigated me?" "No. I mean, yes, but not intentionally. I was looking up your emergency contact, Mrs. Henderson. I saw the photo." He paused, watching her carefully. The child had grey eyes, like mine. The restaurant suddenly felt too hot, too small. Amelia gripped the edge of the table, her vision swimming. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She wasn't ready. She needed time to prepare, to figure out how to tell him in a way that wouldn't destroy everything. "Amelia," Oliver's voice was gentle but insistent, "is there something you need to tell me?" She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the wealthy CEO who had abandoned her, but the man who had held her while she cried, who had made her laugh when she had forgotten how, who had loved her with a desperation that had matched her own. and she realized she couldn't keep lying. Not anymore. "Her name is Grace," she whispered. "She's 16 months old. And she's yours." The color drained from Oliver's face. He sat perfectly still, his hands frozen on the table, his chest barely moving with each shallow breath. For a moment, Amelia thought he might pass out. "I have a daughter," he said finally, the words barely audible. "Yes, you were pregnant. When I left, you were..." "I didn't know yet. I found out 3 weeks later." The words tumbled out now, a dam breaking after months of careful control. "I tried to contact you. I called your office, but they told me you weren't accepting personal calls. I sent emails, but they bounced back. I even tried to reach you through the hotel, but you had checked out with no forwarding information." Oliver's hands were shaking. "I never got any messages. I swear to you, Amelia, if I had known..." "I know." And she did, finally. She could see the devastation in his eyes, the grief for time lost and moments missed. "I know you didn't abandon us intentionally, but it doesn't change the fact that I went through the pregnancy alone, that I gave birth alone, that I've been raising her alone. You should have kept trying." His voice was thick with emotion. "You should have shown up at my office, caused a scene, done whatever it took. I was 3 months pregnant, working 2 jobs and barely keeping a roof over my head. I didn't have the luxury of grand gestures." Amelia's own anger surfaced, sharp and clean. "You left me with nothing, Oliver. No number, no address, no way to reach you. And when I finally did try, I was dismissed like I was just another woman trying to get close to the wealthy CEO." "God!" Oliver dropped his head into his hands. "I did that. I told my assistant to screen all personal calls because I couldn't handle hearing from Genevieve or her family. I never thought that I might need you," Amelia finished. "That I might be carrying your child and desperate enough to swallow my pride and beg for help." He looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make this right." "You can't. Those months are gone. I can't give them back to you and you can't give them back to me. But I can be here now if you'll let me. If you'll give me a chance to know my daughter." Amelia had imagined this conversation 100 times, had rehearsed all the ways she would tell him no, would protect Grace from the possibility of abandonment. But looking at Oliver now, seeing the raw anguish on his face, she couldn't find the words to refuse him. "She doesn't know you exist," Amelia said carefully. I told her that her father loved us, but couldn't be with us. I didn't want her to grow up thinking she wasn't wanted. I do want her. I want both of you, more than anything." Oliver reached across the table again, and this time Amelia didn't pull away when he took both her hands in his. "Please, let me meet her. Let me try to be the father she deserves. And when you get bored, when the novelty wears off, and you realize that parenting is exhausting and thankless, and nothing like the fantasy you've built in your head, I won't. I swear to you, Amelia, I won't abandon her. I won't abandon you. Not again." She wanted to believe him, wanted it so desperately it frightened her. But trust, once shattered, was not easily repaired. "I need time," she said finally. "This is too much, too fast. I need to think about what's best for Grace." "Of course, take all the time you need." But she could see the desperation in his eyes, the need to connect with the daughter he hadn't known existed. Can I at least see a picture of her?" Amelia hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Her lock screen was a photo of Grace taken just last week. The little girl was laughing, her dark curls wild around her face, her grey eyes bright with mischief. Oliver took the phone with trembling hands. He stared at the photo for a long moment, his thumb tracing over Grace's face. Then he made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "She's beautiful. She looks like you. She has your eyes. And your birthmark." Amelia pointed to Grace's exposed shoulder in the photo, where the small crescent moon was just visible. "Same spot, same shape." Oliver touched his own shoulder unconsciously, and Amelia saw a tear slide down his cheek. He didn't bother to wipe it away. "I have a daughter," he said again, wonder and heartbreak mingling in his voice. "We made a daughter." "Yes." He looked up at her, his eyes blazing with intensity. "I know I have no right to ask this. I know I forfeited any claim through my own cowardice. But please, Amelia, please let me be part of her life, part of both your lives. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll be whatever you need me to be." Amelia felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble, This was the man she had fallen in love with in Paris, vulnerable, honest, willing to lay himself bare for the chance at something real. But she had Grace to protect now. And no matter what she felt for Oliver, her daughter came first. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I can promise right now." "That's enough." Oliver released her hands reluctantly. "That's more than I deserve." They left the restaurant shortly after, neither having eaten more than a few bites. Oliver insisted on walking her back to her hotel, and they moved through the London streets in silence, the weight of revelations heavy between them. At the hotel entrance, Amelia turned to him. "I need to go back to Manchester tomorrow. The meetings here are done." Panic flashed across his face. "When will I see you again?" "I don't know." "Amelia, please, don't disappear on me again. I can't—" His voice broke. "I can't lose both of you now that I know you exist." She softened despite herself. "I won't disappear. You have my number now. I just need time to process this, to figure out how to tell Grace about you in a way that won't confuse or frighten her." "I understand." He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was gentle, reverent. "Thank you for telling me, for giving me even the smallest chance." Amelia's breath caught. They were standing too close, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes, close enough to remember what it felt like to be held by him, to be loved by him. "I should go," she whispered, but she didn't move. "Yes," Oliver agreed, but he didn't step back either. For a moment, they simply stood there, caught in the pull of something that had never really died, no matter how much Amelia had tried to bury it. Then Oliver leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. "Good night, Amelia." "Good night." She forced herself to turn and walk into the hotel, knowing that if she looked back, she would be lost. In the elevator, she sagged against the wall, her heart pounding. She had told him the secret was out, and now she had to figure out what came next. Her phone buzzed. A text from Oliver. "I meant what I said. I love you, both of you. And I'll spend every day proving it if you'll let me." Amelia stared at the message, her vision blurring with tears. She didn't reply. Couldn't reply. Because she didn't know what to say to the man who had broken her heart and was now asking for the chance to heal it. But she saved the message, and that said more than any words could. Oliver stared at his phone for the 100th time that morning, willing it to ring. 3 days had passed since Amelia had returned to Manchester, and the silence was killing him. He had respected her request for space, had resisted the urge to call or text every hour, but the waiting was agony. He had a daughter. The thought consumed him, filled every waking moment and haunted his dreams. Grace, 16 months old, with his eyes and Amelia's smile and a whole lifetime he had already missed. "You're doing it again," Nathan said from the doorway of Oliver's office. "Doing what?" "Staring at your phone like it personally offended you." Nathan entered and dropped into the chair across from Oliver's desk. "Have you heard from her?" "No." Oliver set the phone down, running a hand through his hair. "I'm trying to give her space, but it's torture. What if she changes her mind? What if she decides I don't deserve to know Grace? Does she seem like the vindictive type?" "No. She's incredibly fair, actually. Which is more than I deserve." Oliver leaned back in his chair. "I have a child, Nathan. A daughter I didn't know existed. And I have no idea how to be a father. Nobody does at first. You learn as you go. What if I'm terrible at it? What if I'm like my father? Cold, distant, incapable of real connection?" Nathan's expression softened. "You're nothing like Richard. You've spent your whole life trying not to be. Besides, the fact that you're worried about being a good father already makes you better than him." Oliver wanted to believe that, wanted to believe he could be what Grace needed, but the fear gnawed at him. What if Amelia was right to be cautious? What if he let them down again? His phone buzzed and Oliver grabbed it so quickly he nearly dropped it. A text from Amelia. "Are you free this Saturday? I'd like you to meet Grace." Oliver's heart stopped, then started again at triple speed. His hands shook as he typed, "Yes, absolutely. Where and when?" The response came quickly. "My apartment in Manchester, 2 p.m. I'll send you the address. But Oliver, please don't bring gifts or make a big production. I want this to be natural, not overwhelming for her." He would have agreed to anything. "Understood." "Thank you. I'll be there." He set the phone down and found Nathan watching him with knowing smile. "She's letting you meet your daughter." "Saturday." Oliver's voice cracked on the word. "I'm going to meet my daughter on Saturday." "Then you'd better start preparing. Kids can sense nervousness a mile away." The next 2 days were the longest of Oliver's life. He read parenting books, watched videos about child development, and drove his assistant crazy asking questions about appropriate behavior around toddlers. He bought a small stuffed rabbit, then returned it, remembering Amelia's request. He changed his outfit 7 times on Saturday morning, before settling on dark jeans and a casual sweater. Approachable, he hoped, but not trying too hard. The drive to Manchester felt both endless and too short. Oliver's stomach churned with anxiety as he navigated through the city streets to the modest neighborhood where Amelia lived. Her building was clean but simple, a far cry from his Kensington penthouse. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, his heart hammering. At her door he paused, trying to calm his breathing. This was it. On the other side of this door was his daughter. He knocked. Amelia answered within seconds, as if she had been waiting nearby. She wore jeans and a soft lavender sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked young and nervous and so beautiful it made his chest ache. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." Oliver's voice came out rougher than intended. "Thank you for this." "For letting me come in." She stepped back, allowing him entry. The apartment was small but cozy, filled with warmth that his sterile penthouse lacked. Children's toys were scattered on a colorful playmat, and photographs covered nearly every surface, most of them featuring Grace at various stages of her young life. Oliver wanted to examine each one, to memorize the moments he had missed. "She's in her room," Amelia said, her voice tight with tension. "I told her we have a visitor. She's usually shy with strangers at first." The word stranger landed like a blow, but Oliver nodded. "I understand." Amelia led him down a short hallway to a door decorated with rainbow stickers. She knocked gently. "Grace, our friend is here. Are you ready to say hello?" There was a moment of silence, then a small voice said, "Okay, Mama." Amelia pushed open the door, and Oliver's world tilted. Grace sat on the floor surrounded by wooden blocks, her dark curls a wild halo around her face. She looked up with those storm grey eyes, his eyes, and Oliver felt something inside him shift irrevocably. This was his daughter, his child, the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Grace, this is Oliver," Amelia said gently, crouching beside her daughter. "Can you say hello?" Grace studied him solemnly, her tiny face serious. Then she held up a red block. "Block," she announced proudly. Oliver's throat tightened. He carefully lowered himself to the floor, mindful of keeping his distance. "That's a very nice block. What are you building?" "Tower." Grace placed the block carefully on top of a precarious stack. "Big tower." "It's a very impressive tower." Oliver watched her, drinking in every detail, the way her tongue peeked out when she concentrated, the dimple in her left cheek, the small hands that were so like Amelia's. Grace continued building, occasionally glancing at him with curiosity but not fear. Amelia sat nearby, watching them both with an expression Oliver couldn't quite read. "Can I help?" Oliver asked Grace. She considered this, then handed him a blue block. "Here." Oliver took it like it was made of gold. "Where should I put it?" Grace pointed to a spot on her tower. Oliver placed the block carefully, and when the structure didn't collapse, Grace clapped her hands. "Good." Something warm unfurled in Oliver's chest. "Thank you." They played in silence for a while, Grace gradually warming to his presence. She showed him her stuffed animals, explained in her limited vocabulary which ones were her favorites, and eventually climbed onto the small sofa where Amelia sat. "Mama, juice?" Grace asked. "Of course, sweetheart." Amelia stood, and Grace immediately held up her arms to be carried. Amelia scooped her up naturally, settling her on her hip. "We'll be right back." Oliver stood as well, following them to the small kitchen. He watched as Amelia prepared Grace's sippy cup with practiced efficiency, the two of them moving together in a dance they had clearly performed 1,000 times. He had missed this. All of it. The ordinary moments that made up a life. Grace drank her juice while regarding Oliver over the rim of her cup. When she finished, she held it out to Amelia, then surprised everyone by reaching toward Oliver. "Up?" she asked. Oliver looked at Amelia, seeking permission. She nodded, her eyes bright with emotion. With shaking hands, Oliver took his daughter for the first time. Grace settled against his chest, small and warm and trusting, and Oliver felt tears burn behind his eyes. She smelled like baby shampoo and something sweet, and she was perfect. "Hi, Grace," he whispered. She patted his cheek with one small hand. "Hi." Oliver looked at Amelia over their daughter's head and saw his own emotions reflected in her face, hope and fear, and something that looked dangerously like love. This was his family, and he would spend the rest of his life proving he deserved them. Amelia watched Oliver hold their daughter with a mixture of emotions she couldn't untangle. There was anger, still sharp beneath the surface, for the time he had missed. Relief that he was here now, that Grace was accepting him. And underneath it all, a terrifying tenderness for the man who looked at their child like she had hung the moon. Grace grew sleepy after her juice, her head dropping onto Oliver's shoulder. He froze, clearly uncertain what to do. "She's ready for her nap," Amelia said softly. "Would you like to help me put her down?" Oliver nodded, incapable of speech. He followed Amelia to Grace's room, where the crib waited with its soft blankets and stuffed animals. Amelia showed him how to lay Grace down gently, how to tuck the blanket around her small body. "Night-night, Mama," Grace murmured, her eyes already closing. "Sweet dreams, baby girl." Amelia kissed her forehead, then stepped back so Oliver could say goodbye. He stood beside the crib, his hand hovering over Grace's curls. Finally, he bent and pressed the softest kiss to her head. "Sleep well, Grace." They left the room quietly, Amelia pulling the door partly closed. In the living room, Oliver sank onto the sofa, as if his legs could no longer support him. "She's perfect," he said, his voice thick. "Amelia, she's absolutely perfect." "She is." Amelia sat in the armchair across from him, needing the distance. "She's also exhausting and stubborn, and has your talent for not listening when she doesn't want to." A laugh burst from Oliver, surprised and genuine. "Does she? You should see her when I try to get her to eat vegetables. She crosses her arms and gives me this look," Amelia demonstrated, and Oliver laughed again, the sound warming something inside her she thought had frozen permanently. "I wish I had been there," he said, his smile fading, "for all of it. The pregnancy, the birth, her first smile, first word, everything." "Her first word was no," Amelia said, very emphatic. "Mrs. Henderson said it was perfectly appropriate given her parentage." "Smart woman, Mrs. Henderson. I'd like to meet her if she's willing, to thank her for helping you when I wasn't there." The sincerity in his voice made Amelia's defenses waver. "She'd like that. She's been more family to me than anyone since my parents died." Oliver leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Tell me about it, the pregnancy. I know it's painful to revisit, but I need to understand what you went through." Amelia hesitated, then found herself talking about the morning sickness that had lasted all day, about working at the bakery while her back ached and her feet swelled, about Mrs. Henderson finding her crying in the stockroom one afternoon and taking her in without question. "She gave me the room above the bakery," Amelia said, "refused to let me pay rent, said she had always wanted a daughter and I was an answer to prayer. She held my hand during labor when I thought I couldn't do it anymore." Oliver's jaw clenched, but he said nothing, letting her continue. "Grace was born at 3 in the morning on March 15th, 6 pounds 2 ounces. She came out screaming, and I thought my heart would explode from loving her so much." Amelia smiled at the memory. "The nurse asked if I wanted to call the father, and I said no because I didn't think you'd care." "I would have been there," Oliver said fiercely. "If I had known, nothing could have kept me away. Not business, not family obligations, not the entire board of directors. I would have been there. I know that now, but then I was just a girl you had a week-long affair with in Paris. How was I supposed to know you'd broken your engagement for me?" "Because I loved you. Love you." Oliver stood, too agitated to sit still. "I never stopped, Amelia. Not for a single day." She stood as well, wrapping her arms around herself. "Love isn't enough, Oliver. I need stability for Grace. I need to know that if she gets attached to you, you won't disappear when things get difficult." "I won't. I swear on everything I have." "You swore you'd call me from Singapore," she interrupted, the old hurt rising. "You said, 'I'll call you tomorrow,' and then you were gone." Oliver's face crumpled. I know I did, and I have no excuse except cowardice. I was terrified of what I felt for you, terrified of disrupting the life my father had planned. So I ran. He moved closer and Amelia forced herself not to retreat. "But I'm not running anymore. I'm here and I'm fighting for you. For Grace. For us." "There is no us," Amelia said, but the words lacked conviction. "Isn't there?" Oliver stopped, just out of reach, giving her space but holding her gaze. "You feel it too, Amelia. This thing between us that never died. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you feel nothing when you look at me." She couldn't. Because she did feel it. The pull, the connection, the love she had tried so hard to bury. It terrified her. "What I feel doesn't matter," she said instead. "Grace comes first. Always. I agree completely. She should come first." Oliver's voice softened. "But maybe we can come first together. As a family." "We're not a family. We're two people who share a child. We could be more. If you'd give me a chance to prove myself." Amelia shook her head, backing away. "I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I need to protect her. From me? From being abandoned. From loving someone who might leave." Her voice broke. "I won't let her go through what I did." Understanding dawned in Oliver's eyes. "You're not protecting her. You're protecting yourself." The truth of it hit her like a blow. "Maybe I am. Maybe I have that right after what you did." "You do. Absolutely." Oliver didn't advance, didn't push. "But I'm not asking for your trust overnight. I'm asking for the chance to earn it. Let me be part of Grace's life. Let me prove that I'm here to stay." Amelia wanted to refuse, wanted to guard her heart and her daughter from the possibility of future pain. But watching Oliver with Grace, seeing the reverence with which he had held her, the tears he had tried to hide, she couldn't deny him the chance to be a father. "Saturdays," she said finally. "You can come on Saturdays. For a few hours. We'll see how it goes." Relief flooded Oliver's face. "Thank you. You won't regret this." "I hope not." Amelia walked to the door, needing him to leave before she softened further. "I'll text you next week to confirm the time." Oliver followed, pausing at the threshold. "Can I ask one thing?" "What?" "Can I help financially? For Grace? I know you've been managing alone, but she's my responsibility too. Please let me at least do this." Pride warred with practicality in Amelia's chest. She had struggled for so long, had sacrificed so much to provide for Grace. But she couldn't deny that Oliver's help would make things easier. "We'll discuss it," she said carefully. "But don't think you can buy your way into her life." "I don't. I know this will take time." He hesitated, then added softly, "Thank you for today. For letting me meet her. She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "She is," Amelia agreed. After Oliver left, she stood at the window watching his car pull away. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you doesn't even begin to cover it. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of both of you." Amelia pressed her hand to her heart, feeling it crack open just a little. She was in dangerous territory, falling for him again despite every warning her mind screamed. But as she checked on sleeping Grace and saw her daughter's peaceful face, Amelia wondered if maybe, just maybe, taking the risk might be worth it. 6 weeks passed in a blur of Saturdays that became the highlight of Oliver's existence. He drove to Manchester every weekend without fail, rain or shine, arriving at Amelia's door with the punctuality of a man who had been counting the minutes until he could see his daughter again. And he had been. Every single one. Grace had stopped being shy around him by the 3rd visit. Now she ran to the door when he knocked, shouting, "Ollie! Ollie!" in her sweet voice that made his heart clench every time. She couldn't quite manage Oliver yet, and he wouldn't have changed it for the world. Today she was particularly energetic, dragging him by the hand to show him a picture she had colored. It was mostly scribbles in purple crayon, but Oliver praised it like it was a masterpiece. "This is incredible, Grace. Is this a flower?" "Butterfly," she corrected indignantly, and Amelia laughed from the kitchen where she was preparing lunch. That laugh. Oliver lived for the moments when Amelia forgot to guard herself, when she relaxed enough to smile at something Grace did, or to roll her eyes at one of his terrible jokes. Those moments gave him hope that maybe, eventually, she might forgive him completely. "My apologies," Oliver said seriously to Grace. "It's clearly a butterfly. The most beautiful butterfly I've ever seen." Grace beamed and ran off to get more paper, leaving Oliver alone in the living room. He stood, stretching his legs, and found himself drawn to the photographs on the mantel. There were dozens of Grace at various stages: newborn, 6 months, 1 year. Each one a moment he had missed. "Stop torturing yourself," Amelia said softly from behind him. Oliver turned to find her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I can't help it. Every time I see these, I think about where I was on that day. What meaningless meeting I was in while you were experiencing these moments alone. You're here now, that's what matters to Grace. But is it enough for you?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken longing. Amelia looked away first, busying herself with straightening magazines that didn't need straightening. "You've been good to her," she said finally. "Patient, consistent. She's growing attached to you. And you? Are you growing attached to me?" Oliver moved closer, drawn by a force he couldn't resist. "Or do you still see me as the man who abandoned you?" Amelia's hands stilled. "I see both. The man who left and the man who came back. I don't know how to reconcile them. Let me help you." Oliver reached out slowly, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Let me show you that I've changed. People don't change, Oliver. Not fundamentally. Then let me show you that the man you fell in love with in Paris is still here. That he never left. He was just buried under fear and obligation." Amelia's breath hitched. They were standing too close, close enough that Oliver could see the gold flecks in her hazel eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Close enough that if he leaned down just a little— "Mama! Ollie! Look!" Grace's voice shattered the moment. She came running with a book, completely oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. Amelia stepped back quickly, color high in her cheeks. "What do you have, sweetheart?" "Book. Read?" "Of course." Amelia took the book, settling onto the sofa. Grace immediately climbed up beside her, then surprised Oliver by patting the cushion on her other side. "Ollie, sit." Oliver looked at Amelia, seeking permission. She nodded, and he sat carefully, Grace between them like a tiny bridge connecting two islands. Amelia began to read, her voice soft and soothing. Grace leaned against her mother, sucking her thumb contentedly. And somehow, by the 3rd page, Grace had shifted, so she was leaning against both of them, her small body pressed against Amelia's side, while her hand rested on Oliver's knee. Oliver barely heard the story. He was too focused on this moment, his daughter comfortable and safe between them, Amelia's voice washing over him like a benediction, the three of them together in this small apartment that felt more like home than anywhere he had ever lived. When the story ended, Grace had fallen asleep. Amelia carefully extracted herself and gestured for Oliver to help lift Grace. Together, they carried her to the bedroom and tucked her into the crib. In the hallway, standing close in the dim light, Amelia finally spoke. "You're good with her, better than I expected. I love her. It's not difficult to be good to someone you love. And what about me?" The question was barely a whisper. "Do you still love me, Oliver? Or was that just something you said?" Oliver's heart hammered. This was the moment, the opening he had been waiting for. "I have never stopped loving you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not for 1 second of one day since I met you. You are in every breath I take, every thought I have. You are my first thought in the morning and my last before sleep. I love you, Amelia Sinclair. I am utterly, completely, irrevocably in love with you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I want to believe you." "Then do, please." He cupped her face gently, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Give me a chance to prove it. Not just to Grace, but to you." "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. So am I. But I'm more scared of living without you." Amelia closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "If you hurt me again, I won't. I swear on Grace's life, I won't." She opened her eyes, and Oliver saw hope there, fragile but real. Okay, we can try. Slowly. For Grace's sake. For Grace's sake," Oliver agreed, though they both knew it was for more than that. "Thank you." He wanted to kiss her, wanted it so badly he ached with it. But he held back, sensing she wasn't ready. Instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead, breathing in the scent of her. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "Let you rest." Amelia nodded but didn't move away. "Same time next Saturday?" "I'll be here." As Oliver drove back to London that evening, he couldn't stop smiling. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning, and he would build on this beginning, brick by careful brick, until Amelia trusted him completely, until she loved him again. The crisis came on a Thursday afternoon. Amelia was at work when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Her heart sank when she heard Mrs. Henderson's shaking voice. "Amelia, dear, I'm so sorry. Grace fell at the park. We're at the hospital. She hit her head." The phone slipped from Amelia's nerveless fingers. Thomas appeared at her cubicle, his face concerned. "Amelia, what's wrong?" "My daughter. Hospital. I have to go. I'll handle everything here." Amelia grabbed her coat and ran. The taxi ride to Manchester Children's Hospital was the longest 20 minutes of her life. She burst through the emergency room doors, wild-eyed and terrified, demanding to see her daughter. A nurse led her to a room where Mrs. Henderson sat holding Grace, who was crying but conscious. A purple bruise was already forming on her forehead. "Baby!" Amelia rushed forward, taking Grace into her arms. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm here. Mama's here." Grace's cries intensified, her small hands fisting in Amelia's shirt. Mrs. Henderson looked devastated. "I turned away for just a second to answer my phone. She climbed on the slide by herself and lost her balance. I'm so sorry, Amelia." "It's not your fault." Amelia kissed Grace's head, checking for other injuries. "Accidents happen." A doctor entered, introducing himself and explaining that Grace likely had a mild concussion. They wanted to keep her for observation overnight, just to be safe. Amelia nodded numbly, her entire focus on her daughter. She didn't realize she was crying until Grace patted her wet cheek and said, "No cry, Mama. I'm okay, baby. I'm okay now that I'm with you." Hours passed. Grace was moved to a room, her head bandaged, her usual energy dimmed by pain medication. Amelia sat beside the bed, refusing to let go of her hand, even when the nurses suggested she rest. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages from work, from Mrs. Henderson checking in, and then at 8 in the evening a call from Oliver. She almost didn't answer, but Grace stirred at the sound, and Amelia found herself accepting the call. "Amelia, I tried calling earlier. Is everything okay?" His voice nearly undid her. She stepped into the hallway, her voice breaking as she explained about Grace's fall, the hospital, the concussion. "I'm coming." Oliver's voice was pure steel. "Text me which hospital." "I'll be there in 2 hours." "Oliver, you don't have to. She's my daughter, you're—" He stopped, then continued more quietly. "I'm coming. Please don't shut me out." Amelia was too exhausted to argue. She sent the information and returned to Grace's bedside. True to his word, Oliver arrived exactly 2 hours later. He appeared in the doorway, still in his suit from work, his face pale and strained. When he saw Grace sleeping with the bandage on her head, he made a sound of pure anguish. "Oh God, she's okay, mild concussion. They're keeping her overnight for observation." Amelia stood, swaying slightly. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, hadn't slept. Oliver caught her elbow, steadying her. "When did you last eat?" "I don't remember." "Stay with her, I'll be right back." He returned 15 minutes later with sandwiches and coffee from the hospital cafeteria. Amelia tried to protest, but he gave her a look that brooked no argument. "Eat. You won't help Grace by making yourself sick." She ate mechanically while Oliver took the chair on Grace's other side. He held their daughter's small hand with infinite gentleness, his jaw tight. "I should have been there," he said quietly. "If I had been there, maybe I could have caught her." "Don't. Mrs. Henderson already feels terrible. Accidents happen, Oliver. We can't prevent everything." "I want to." His voice was raw. "I want to protect her from everything. From falls and skinned knees and broken hearts and every bad thing in this world. You can't, none of us can. All we can do is be there when they need us." Oliver looked at her, his grey eyes swimming with emotion. "I am here. Whenever you need me, whenever she needs me, I will be here. You don't have to do this alone anymore." The words broke something in Amelia. All the fear, the exhaustion, the terror of those first moments when she thought Grace might be seriously hurt, it all came pouring out. She started crying, great gasping sobs that she tried to muffle with her hand. Oliver was beside her in an instant, pulling her into his arms. She should have pushed him away, should have maintained the distance she had carefully constructed. But she was so tired of being strong, so tired of carrying everything alone, so she let him hold her. Let herself collapse against his chest while he murmured soothing words and stroked her hair and promised that everything would be okay. "I was so scared," she whispered against his shirt. "When Mrs. Henderson called, I thought, I know. He held her tighter. "But she's okay. She's going to be fine." They stayed like that until Amelia's tears subsided. When she finally pulled back, Oliver's shirt was damp and wrinkled, but he didn't seem to care. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "I didn't mean to fall apart on you. Don't apologize, not for this, not ever." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a lingering tear. "Let me be here for you, Amelia. Let me help carry the burden." "Mama?" Grace's sleepy voice interrupted. "Ollie?" They both turned to find her awake, looking between them with confused eyes. "We're here, sweetheart," Amelia said, moving to the bedside. "We're both here." Grace held out her arms, wanting to be held. Amelia carefully lifted her, and Grace immediately reached for Oliver too. There was no choice but to sit together on the hospital bed, Grace cradled between them. "Head hurts," Grace mumbled. "I know, baby. The medicine will help soon." Amelia kissed her forehead gently. "Ollie stay?" Grace asked. Oliver looked at Amelia, seeking permission. She nodded, too overwhelmed to object. "I'll stay as long as you want me to," Oliver promised their daughter. Grace sighed contentedly, her eyes drifting closed again. Within minutes she was asleep, comfortable and safe between her parents. Amelia looked at Oliver over their daughter's head and saw her own exhaustion reflected there, along with something else. Determination, devotion, love. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming." "Always," he whispered back. "I'll always come when you need me." And for the first time since Paris, Amelia believed him. Grace was released from the hospital the next morning with strict instructions to rest. Oliver insisted on driving them home, and Amelia was too grateful to refuse. She sat in the back with Grace, while Oliver navigated Manchester's streets with careful precision. "Ollie, sing?" Grace requested from her car seat, her voice still weak but determined. Oliver glanced in the rearview mirror, panic flickering across his face. "I don't really sing, sweetheart." "Please?" Grace's lower lip trembled, and both adults knew they were defeated. Oliver began singing a nursery rhyme in a surprisingly pleasant baritone. Grace clapped delightedly, and Amelia found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. This man, this powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals, was singing children's songs to make their daughter happy. When they reached the apartment, Oliver carried Grace upstairs while Amelia gathered their things. Inside, he settled Grace on the sofa with her favorite blanket and stuffed rabbit. "I should let you rest," Oliver said reluctantly. "Stay." The word escaped before Amelia could stop it. "Please, just for a little while." Relief flooded his face. "Of course." They spent the afternoon in quiet domesticity. Oliver made tea while Amelia changed into comfortable clothes. Grace dozed on and off, demanding stories when she was awake. Oliver read to her with exaggerated voices that made her giggle, and Amelia watched from the kitchen, her heart doing dangerous things in her chest. This was what she had dreamed of during the lonely pregnancy. A partner. Someone to share the burden and the joy. Someone who looked at their daughter with such profound love, it made Amelia's eyes sting. Later, after Grace had eaten dinner and been bathed, she fell asleep on the sofa between them. Oliver looked down at her with wonder. "She's amazing," he said softly. "You've done an incredible job raising her, Amelia." "I had help. Mrs. Henderson was my lifeline." "I should have been your lifeline." Oliver's voice was thick with regret. "I should have been there for every moment. You're here now." He looked at her, hope blazing in his eyes. "Does that mean something?" "That you're willing to let me stay." Amelia's heart pounded. This was the precipice. She could pull back, maintain her walls, keep them safe from potential heartbreak, or she could leap, trusting that Oliver would catch them. "I'm tired of being angry," she admitted. "I'm tired of pretending I don't feel anything when you're near. You hurt me, Oliver, deeply, but you've also shown me who you really are these past weeks. Patient, kind, devoted to Grace. And to you," he added quietly. "Always to you." She reached across their sleeping daughter and took his hand. "I need you to promise me something." "Anything." Promise that if this gets hard, and it will, you won't run, that you'll stay and fight for us." "I promise." Oliver lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I will never run from you again. You and Grace are my life now. Everything else is just noise." Tears slipped down Amelia's cheeks. "I want to believe that." "Then let me prove it. Every single day, let me prove it." She nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Oliver stood carefully, lifting Grace in his arms. "Let me put her to bed. You've been awake for nearly 36 hours. Amelia watched him carry their daughter to her room, heard the soft murmur of his voice as he tucked her in. When he returned, she had made a decision. "Move here," she said. Oliver froze. "What?" "Not into the apartment, but to Manchester. Get a place nearby. I want Grace to see you more than once a week. I want—" She paused, gathering courage. "I want to see you more than once a week." "I'll start looking tomorrow," Oliver said immediately. "I can work remotely most days. Come to London for critical meetings. Nathan can handle the rest. Your father won't approve. I don't care what he approves. You and Grace are my priority now." Amelia stood, closing the distance between them. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it race beneath her palm. "This is terrifying." "I know." He covered her hand with his. "But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Amelia. I love Grace. And I will spend every day proving I'm worthy of you both." She rose on her toes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "You already are." 3 weeks later, Oliver signed the lease on a townhouse 10 minutes from Amelia's apartment. It was smaller than his London penthouse, cozier, with a garden where Grace could play. He furnished it simply, focusing on creating a space where his daughter would feel comfortable. The first time Grace stayed overnight with him, Amelia nearly called it off 3 times. She paced her empty apartment, checking her phone obsessively, fighting the urge to drive over and bring her baby home. Oliver's text came at 8. She had dinner, a bath, and is currently demanding her 5th story. I think she's stalling bedtime. Amelia smiled despite her anxiety. She does that. Be firm but gentle. An hour later, a photo arrived. Grace asleep in a new bed, clutching her rabbit, looking peaceful and safe. Oliver's message read, "She's perfect. Thank you for trusting me with her." Amelia cried then, releasing tension she hadn't known she was carrying. He was doing this, really doing it. Building a life here, being a father, keeping his promises. The next morning, Oliver brought Grace home with pancakes from her favorite cafe. The little girl ran to Amelia, chattering about her sleepover with Ollie, about the bedtime stories and the nightlight shaped like stars. "She did great," Oliver said, handing Amelia the coffee he'd brought her. "Though I barely slept, I kept checking to make sure she was breathing." Amelia laughed. "Welcome to parenthood." Their eyes met and something shifted. The laughter faded into awareness, into the tension that had been building between them for weeks. Oliver stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Amelia." Grace chose that moment to spill juice on the floor, shattering the spell. They sprang apart, tending to the mess, but Amelia's skin burned where he had touched her. The pattern repeated over the following weeks. Moments of almost kisses, almost confessions, almost breakthroughs, interrupted by the realities of parenting a toddler. But with each near miss, the pull between them grew stronger. Oliver came for dinner most evenings. They cooked together while Grace played, moving around each other with increasing familiarity. He learned where Amelia kept the spices, how she liked her tea. She learned that he hummed when he chopped vegetables and that he couldn't cook rice without burning it. One evening, after Grace was asleep, they sat on the sofa with wine, finally able to talk uninterrupted. "I spoke to my father today," Oliver said quietly. Amelia tensed. "How did that go?" "He's furious, says I'm throwing away the family legacy for—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "For what?" "For a common woman and her bastard child." Oliver's voice was flat, but Amelia saw the fury in his eyes. "I told him that woman is the love of my life and that child is his granddaughter. Then I hung up on him." Amelia set down her wine, her hands shaking. "Oliver, I don't want to come between you and your family. You're not. He is. He's been controlling my life since I was born, and I'm done." He turned to her, taking her hands. "You and Grace are my family now. Nothing else matters. He could make things difficult for you, for the company. Let him try. I've built safeguards. Nathan supports me. The board respects me. My father has less power than he thinks. Oliver's thumb stroked over her knuckles. I'm not losing you again. Not for him, not for anyone. Amelia felt tears threatening. I'm scared. Of what? Of how much I'm starting to need you, of how much Grace needs you. What if... I'm not leaving, Oliver interrupted firmly. Say it with me. I'm not leaving. Oliver. Say it, Amelia. I need you to believe it. You're not leaving, she whispered. Again, with conviction this time. You're not leaving, she said stronger, and felt something inside her crack open. Oliver pulled her closer until she was tucked against his side. I love you. I've loved you since Paris, and I'll love you until I stop breathing. You're it for me, Amelia Sinclair. You and Grace. My whole world. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. His face was so close, his lips mere inches away. All she had to do was lean forward. But something held her back. Fear, maybe. Or the need to be absolutely certain. I'm getting there, she said instead. I'm almost ready to trust this completely. Take all the time you need. Oliver pressed a kiss to her forehead. I'm not going anywhere. The breakthrough came on a rainy Saturday in May. Grace had turned 2 the week before, and they had celebrated with a small party in Oliver's garden. Watching him with their daughter, patient, loving, completely devoted, had done something to Amelia's resistance. Tonight, Grace was staying with Mrs. Henderson, giving Amelia a rare evening alone. Oliver had invited her to his townhouse for dinner, and she had accepted with a nervousness that felt both thrilling and terrifying. She stood at his door in a simple coral dress, her heart racing. When Oliver answered, his eyes darkened with appreciation. You look stunning, he said, his voice rough. Thank you. She stepped inside, taking in the candles he had lit, the soft music playing. You didn't have to do all this. I wanted to. I wanted tonight to be special. He led her to the dining room where he had prepared dinner himself, pasta with homemade sauce, salad, bread still warm from the oven. You cooked? Amelia couldn't hide her surprise. I've been practicing. Nathan's been giving me lessons. Oliver pulled out her chair. Fair warning, it might be terrible. It wasn't. The food was simple but delicious, and they talked easily, laughing about Grace's latest antics and Oliver's disastrous first attempt at baking cookies. After dinner, they moved to the sofa with wine. Rain drummed against the windows, creating a cocoon of intimacy. Amelia felt her defenses lowering, the walls she had so carefully constructed crumbling brick by brick. Can I ask you something? Oliver said quietly. Anything. What changed? You've been different lately. Softer with me. Amelia considered the question. I stopped being afraid. Or maybe I'm still afraid, but I realized that loving you scares me less than not loving you. Oliver's breath caught. You love me. I never stopped, she admitted. Even when I hated you, even when I was angry and hurt, I loved you. I just didn't want to admit it. He set down his wine with shaking hands. Say it again. I love you, Oliver Cunningham. I love how you are with Grace. I love that you moved your entire life to be near us. I love that you sing terrible nursery rhymes and can't cook rice and read bedtime stories with silly voices. Her voice broke. I love you, and I'm tired of fighting it. Oliver cupped her face with both hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. I have waited so long to hear you say that. I know. I'm sorry it took me. He kissed her. Finally, after months of restraint, he closed the distance and captured her lips with his. The kiss was gentle at first, reverent, as if he was afraid she might disappear. But when Amelia wound her arms around his neck and pulled him closer, something broke free. The kiss deepened, becoming urgent, desperate, a release of months of denied longing. Oliver's hands slid into her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss further. Amelia gasped against his mouth, and he swallowed the sound, kissing her like she was oxygen, and he had been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Oliver rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. God, Amelia, I love you so much. Show me, she said, and kissed him again. This kiss was different, slower, deeper, weighted with promise. Oliver's hands traced down her sides, learning the shape of her, reacquainting himself with curves he had memorized in Paris. Amelia's fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel his skin against hers. Are you sure? Oliver pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. We can wait. I don't want to rush you. I'm sure. I want this. I want you. She smiled tremulously. Take me to bed, Oliver. He stood, lifting her in his arms, and carried her toward the stairs. At the bedroom door, he paused. Last chance to change your mind. In answer, Amelia kissed him with all the love and desire she had been holding back for so long. There would be no more waiting. Amelia woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, and the warmth of Oliver's body curved around hers. His arm was draped across her waist, his breath soft against her neck. She smiled, turning carefully in his embrace. He was already awake, watching her with such tenderness it made her breath catch. Good morning, he whispered, brushing a kiss across her forehead. Good morning. She traced the line of his jaw, still marveling that this was real. Any regrets? Only that we waited so long. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Last night was perfect. You are perfect. Heat rose in her cheeks as she remembered the night before. The slow reverence of his touch, the whispered declarations, the way he had worshipped every inch of her skin as if she were precious beyond measure. They had loved each other with a desperate tenderness, healing old wounds with every caress. What time do we need to pick up Grace? Oliver asked, his fingers trailing lazy patterns on her shoulder. Not until 11. Mrs. Henderson is taking her to the park first. Amelia snuggled closer. We have time. Good. Oliver pulled her on top of him, his hands spanning her waist. Because I'm not nearly done with you yet. 3 months later, on a warm August evening, Oliver picked Grace up from daycare while Amelia finished work. They had fallen into a comfortable rhythm, shared custody, shared dinners, shared lives. Oliver had proposed moving in together, but Amelia had asked for more time. She wanted to be certain, wanted Grace to be certain, before they made it official. Tonight, Oliver seemed nervous as they drove to the beach outside Manchester. Grace chattered in the back seat, oblivious to the tension radiating from her father. Everything okay? Amelia asked, touching his hand. Perfect, he said, but didn't elaborate. The beach was nearly empty in the evening light. Oliver spread a blanket while Grace ran toward the water, squealing with delight. Amelia chased after her, laughing, while Oliver watched with an expression she couldn't quite read. After Grace had tired herself out building sandcastles, she climbed into Amelia's lap, drowsy and content. Oliver moved closer, and something in his face made Amelia's heart race. Grace, sweetheart, Oliver said gently. Can you help Daddy with something? Grace perked up. Help? Oliver pulled a small box from his pocket and handed it to Grace. Can you give this to Mama for me? Grace took the box with wide eyes, turning it over in her small hands. Amelia's breath stopped as Oliver dropped to one knee in the sand. Amelia Sinclair, he began, his voice thick with emotion. 2 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life when I walked away from you, but you gave me a second chance. You let me be a father to our incredible daughter. You taught me what it means to truly love someone. Tears were already streaming down Amelia's face. Grace, sensing something important was happening, carefully handed her the box. You are my home, Oliver continued. You and Grace. You're everything I never knew I needed and everything I never want to lose again. So I'm asking you, in front of our daughter, in front of God and the ocean, and anyone who might be watching, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you? Amelia opened the box with shaking hands. The ring was beautiful, a simple diamond that caught the setting sun and threw rainbows across the sand. Yes, she whispered, then stronger. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Oliver surged forward, kissing her deeply while Grace clapped and shouted, Yay! Without fully understanding what was happening. When they broke apart, Oliver slipped the ring on Amelia's finger, his hands trembling. I love you, he said against her lips. Forever. Forever, she agreed. Grace wiggled between them, demanding attention, and they laughed, pulling her into their embrace. The three of them sat on that beach as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, a family finally whole. 2 years later, the garden of their new home bloomed with late spring flowers. Grace, now 4, chased her baby brother across the lawn, while Oliver pretended to be a monster in pursuit. Her delighted shrieks filled the air, and Amelia watched from the porch, her hand resting on her rounded belly. 6 months pregnant with their third child, she had never been happier. Oliver caught Grace and swung her up into his arms, tickling her until she begged for mercy. Then he scooped up 2-year-old James, balancing both children with practiced ease as he walked toward Amelia. "Tired?" he asked, settling beside her on the porch swing. "Happy," she corrected, leaning into his side. That night, after the children were asleep, they danced in the living room to no music but the beating of their hearts. Oliver's hand splayed protectively over her stomach, feeling their daughter kick. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For giving me a chance. For loving me. For this life we've built." He kissed her softly. "For everything." Amelia smiled against his lips. "Thank you for coming back, for staying, for loving us." "Always," he promised, "for the rest of my life." And in that moment, surrounded by the evidence of their love, sleeping children upstairs, a baby growing inside her, a future stretching bright before them, Amelia knew he meant it. They had survived heartbreak and separation, fear and doubt. They had found their way back to each other against all odds. And now they would never be apart again. This was their forever. And it was more than either had ever dared to dream. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.